Good morning, everybody. This is Diggs. It's another beautiful day out here in the Pacific Northwest, and today we're going to be talking about Aranea. We're going to talk about the best way to build her, what we're going to be looking for in the future in order to potentially make her viable, and how you should be building her right now. Let's go ahead and dig in. Now, there's a lot of debate out there on whether or not Aranea is going to be good in the long term, especially with considering Zoom coming out in the next couple of weeks and potentially Setia as well. There's an argument for and an argument against Aranea right now. We're not going to focus on that too much currently. We're just going to focus on what Aranea does good and kind of what her global differences are going to bring to the table and what we're going to really need to maximize her skill power. Now, taking a look at her main job, she is a Brigadier General as a main job with access to Dragoon and Pugilist. Couple interesting things here. She does actually have Dragon Dive in her kit on Dragoon, and I always find Dragon Dive to be a very powerful ability. She also has Sub Pugilist, which is one of those subs where Sub Pugilist on its own is not a incredibly powerful sub job. I mean, you can make an argument that it is occasionally just because there's not a lot of striking resistance in the game, but there's also a lot of other ice units out there that do have Sub Pugilist, and there's almost like a making for an argument of like a Sub Pugilist ice composition. Something to think about, something to look at going forward. Whenever that first ice striking unit comes out, it's very possible we may have an ice strike meta going into the future. Now, she can equip spears. She has access to armors, helmets, and accessories, which most Dragoons have access to. Taking a look at her TMR, the Dragon Mail, not too impressive actually. 468 HP, defense 10, spirit 6, increases agility 25% for 3 turns to self. That's pretty good considering that Aranea has really high base agility, and then it decreases activation time 200 for both non-activation and attack skill activation. 200 is not a very big buff to activation speed. I would have expected to see this be higher, so it's a little interesting that it's only 200, and I'm not sure it's going to make the difference when looking at her kit on whether or not, you know, she's going to prioritize a certain attack or whether or not a jump is going to land. Particularly with the amount of agility in her kit, that's probably going to be enough to put her ahead on the CT list in order to get a jump in and to land that jump. Her mastery ability increases HP 10%, increases ice attack 15 for ice allies, increases agility 10% for self. So if you factor in her mastery ability, she actually has one of the highest agilities in the game. Like, she has 66 base agility, so you know 10% of that is plus 7 agility, which puts her into the 70s range for agility, which is absolutely extremely high. So she is going to be very fast unit. And then interestingly, she has critical damage 5 for self, and this is going to be something we'll talk about going through this video. Is it feels like Aranea is being released without a fully complete almost like a fully complete support kit into the future, and especially as we see kind of this focus on critical hit rate in her kit, it almost feels like we are missing a vision card for her. Taking a look at her stats though, pretty interesting. 20% missile resistance, weak 10% to magic is something to factor in. She has 10% resistance to pierce and 5% resistance to slashing, so she is going to embody that like Dragoon brawler-esque atmosphere. She does have 50% resistance to charm and frostbite, so very few units have access to resist frostbite, which is huge. And she has 10% resistance to disable, which is also pretty good. 3800 HP, again, perfect HP range for a brawler. Attack at 564 is going to put her at the 11th highest base attack. Not kind of the primary focus of her kit, but she will be dealing a lot of damage. Dexterity 220. Now this is kind of the first place that I have an issue with her kit, and again, we're going to talk about this. She has crit damage plus 5 in her mastery ability, which would assume that she's a unit that is designed to critical hit on the opponent, but she only has dexterity plus 220 or dexterity 220, which rates her at around 111th, 112th on the dexterity meter scale in terms of positioning of dexterity, which really puts her in a bad position in order to land critical hits. And, you know, again, this is something we'll be revisiting in this video. I don't know if it's an oversight or if maybe she's a unit that's designed maybe with the future of ice units in mind. Taking a look at her primary support job and counter abilities, she has some pretty good support abilities. Inertia control device is going to be luck plus 12%, pierce attack plus 12. Very powerful. Of course, Sub Dragoon, she has access to that jump plus 1. Electric actuator is going to be defense 12, defense penetration 40. Very powerful here. You're probably going to be setting electric actuator and the inertia control device. I could see a case though for replacing the inertia control device with fighting spirit down here for the attack up and HP up. But the defense 12, defense penetration 40 is obviously, I mean, that's extremely overpowered. She does of course have accuracy plus 20 and upgrade to strike counter because she has sub pugilist. HP up level 1 from Sub Dragoon, and she has Fighting Spirit, which is HP 12%, attack 24%. Again, you'll probably be jumping between Inertia Control Device, Electric Actuator, and Fighting Spirit. What's interesting about her is even though she's a crit damage slash crit unit, or that seems to be her attempted identity through her mastery ability, she has a boatload of defense penetration. Like, we are talking like she will be able to hit, most likely, depending on the vision cards you run, defense penetration 100 quite easily. So she's going to be able to kind of shred any unit that has defense. In terms of counters, interestingly, she has fasting, which I actually think you're not going to be placing. Fasting is a 30% chance to proc, 121% modifier attack counter ability, but it is a counter ability with piercing. And whenever you have a counter ability with piercing, it's very similar to the gunner counter ability, counter shot, where you could intentionally or unintentionally, probably unintentionally, kill your own unit because you could counter. There could be a unit in between you and the enemy, and you can kill your own unit. So I'm not a big fan of pierce attack counter abilities. I do think, since she of course has Dragoon in her sub kit, she is going to have access to Dragon Sword, which is going to have a 20% chance to proc and drain HP from the enemy, and we don't have to worry about that killing our allies. That's going to be much better overall than the regular kind of fasting counter that she has. She of course has Burst counter, which most people are probably never going to set. That's the Pugilist sub that, you know, it's enhanced a little bit, but it's just never really used. It does have a 50% chance to proc at 165% modifier, but honestly, the majority of the time your opponent's not going to be right next to you. They're going to be at range, and it's just going to kind of nullify it entirely because of that. Taking a look at her primary skills, we do have the upgraded Brandish first and foremost. I can't tell, it looks like this is a piercing attack the way this is laid out, but it's a 2-square attack, both in all omnidirectional from you. It's gonna have 165% modifier with plus 100% hit chance. I mean, it's not the worst attack in the world, but you're going to have to be next to your opponent. And again, you know, nowadays you're very often not next to your opponent. Even having an opportunity to attack 2 squares in front of you is very rare. So, you know, it might be a good thing in terms of her AI that her primary attack, even though it's 165% modifier, you have to be so close in range to use it, because then she can kind of focus on the other abilities in her kit. She has 2 buffing abilities. The first one's going to be Frost Arts. Frost Arts upgrades her skill Dragon Leap to basically have Frostbite on it, and it kind of upgrades her defensive capabilities. So if you are wanting to run her in a defensive capacity, you will probably set this ability. Otherwise, you're going to change, like, she almost has 2 modes. She almost has a defensive mode and an offensive mode. And the first ability, Frost Arts, is her defensive mode option buff, which gives defense 15, attack 40%, and upgrades Dragon Leap. Her second buffing ability is actually her job level 25 ability, Air Primacy. which gives pierce attack 40 for 3 turns to allies and defense penetration 30 for 3 turns to self. So again, we talked about how defense penetration, you know, she already has that plus 40 in her kit. Again, here comes another plus 30. She's very easily going to be able to kind of maximize that defense penetration for herself. So you kind of have these two different options in terms of whether she's going to be offensive or defensive. Burst Piercer does get upgraded to Remove Piercer. So it's going to be a 3 range attack, single target, dispel all buffs, dispel haste, and dispel to ignore fatal damage. I think with the amount of Immortal Spirit that is out there in the world, this is going to be very valuable. We have Air Ascent, which is her first jumping ability, 185% modifier, very similar to Dragon Dive. It's 3 spaces away, cross shape, AoE height 1, range height 2. It's also going to decrease the opponent's agility by 20% for 3 turns. Hard to go wrong with this. Dragon Leap does get upgraded. Again, remember, it gets upgraded by Frost Darts if you do decide to go the defensive route. Dragon Leap is a single target jump. It actually has 4 range with range height 1. Decreases single hit resistance 30 for 3 turns to target. 185% modifier attack with a 25% chance to inflict frostbite. So very powerful, very diverse. You kind of have 2 different routes to go with her, offensive or defensive. One thing I really like about her kit so far is that she has things that ice units don't generally have yet. So that's going to be like decreases single hit target resistance. And, you know, even dispel to ignore fatal damage. We do have, you know, Gilgamesh, which does have some dispel related abilities, but it's just nice to have another kind of versatile unit that has access to that in their kit. Also having defense penetration is really nice. In terms of PvE, looking at her sub job, she also has access to rapid thrust, which is 165% modifier to hit attack, which means she will be good in a pierce PvE capacity. She is going to be able to multi-hit. She's going to be able to do a lot of things that for the most part, I would say pierce units have kind of been struggling with. I think a lot of pierce units really struggle. Like, it's a struggle right now to put together a pierce chaining team, unless you have like Glaciella EX, unless you have Murmur EX, right? Like, if you have all of that, it's still a struggle. So I'm excited that, you know, Aranea is going to add some PvE power to pierce chaining. She also has a Angry Spear, which is going to be 25% chance to inflict disable. You have to be right next to the opponent. I don't think you're going to be using that. But basically, you're going to be subbing Brigadier General if you are going to be doing any type of offensive PvE encounter, because it's going to be a multi-hit ability. Now, I do want to talk, before we talk about her sub-jobs, I want to talk about her limit break, because I just talked about how she has things in her kit that not a lot of other ice units have available to them. Her limit break, air superiority, is exactly that. This is also going to buff her defense penetration by 40. So if you're using this and her support ability, she's going to have defense penetration 80, which is ridiculous. It's going to be a 200% modifier attack, and it's going to decrease pierce resistance 38% for 3 turns to target. So being able to have both single hit unit resistance down, a multi-strike piercing ability, and the capability to lower pierce resistance is going to make her very good in terms of a PvE capacity. I also think it's important to note that the range on her limit break is one of the most unique ranges of any ability in the game. It's, you know, we kind of are seeing these shifting ability sizes as we are kind of getting more and more units. With Oberon, we had the 4x2 stun attack basically in front of him, or it might be 5x2. And Aranea's is a basically 3x3 box attack. Essentially, very, very unique, very powerful. It has range height 3, AoE height 1, so it's like you will literally be able to like jump up a cliff and murder somebody with this. It's going to be a very cool ability, and I think it's one of the more unique limit breaks in the game in that capacity. So I'm very excited for it. Now, to take a look just real quickly at her sub jobs, we do have Sub Dragoon and Sub Pugilist. You're basically going to be setting these for one reason. You'll set Sub Dragoon if you do want to utilize Dragon Dive. It's difficult to say when you would want to use Dragon Dive over any of her other abilities. You probably wouldn't. Even having access to Dragonskin, which is usually a perk, 42% attack, she has that in her defensive ability where she increases defense 15 and increases attack 40% with Dragon Leap. So, Sub Dragoon you're probably rarely going to use. Sub Pugilist, I actually think you could make a case for Sub Pugilist in that running Sub Pugilist, if you're going GVG or in Arena, just having access to a ice attack ability that is not piercing could be really viable. Very similar to how when you ran Camillo, at least when I ran Camillo, I ran him Sub Pugilist because a lot of enemies did not have striking resistance, and you can build your setup so that your Aranea will be able to benefit from kind of the other vision cards that are set that are not pierce attack related. So you could set, for example, Fenrir for ice attack plus 50%. You could set Ice Dragon, can't remember his Fries S, for ice attack plus 30 or 35 or whatever it is. So like you could buff her modifications without focusing on pierce attack, so that her kind of the vision card buffs are going to apply to striking as well as piercing, and then she'll kind of have access to two different types of attacks that resistances aren't very common for. So, and she'll have access to single target as well as AoE, right? Because pierce attacks are considered, for the most part, AoE, and striking attacks are mostly single target. So you just have a lot of options in her kit for being able to be flexible with Sub Pugilist. So I think with the way things are set up, we will be running Sub Pugilist on her. In terms of equipment, I have been getting lots of questions on what spear is best for her. And without a doubt, I would say the best in slot spear for her right now is going to be the Ice Lance, which you can actually buy for 2k Visior in the shop right now. And I would encourage all of you to go buy it if you are getting Aranea. If you have Victoria leveled, I would encourage you to go buy it. There's no way, like ice attack plus 30, pierce attack plus 15, that's going to be the best no matter what. It's just the amount of modifier that's on that is so incredibly high that, it's hard to argue. Now, in terms of what type you want to get, I would say probably for most people, Assault. I think Critical would be a good potential future option, but this is where we get into kind of a discussion on how to build her and the vision cards that are available. I think if you're looking at Aranea in a 3-man team, you're going to be seeing potentially a lot of either slash-based vision cards, or you're going to see kind of generic vision cards that buff the party. It's important to note that we do have 2 ice vision cards, which JP does not have. We have access to Fryevia and Fryevia's vision cards, so we do have an ice tank that JP does not have. We also have Starlight Trist, which is a very powerful ice slash vision card, and that just kind of reinforces ice slash. What's unfortunate is you are most likely going to want to be running Aranea's own vision card on her, which does give party-wide maxed out crit plus 15, or crit plus 25, sorry. But it gives AoE resistance and pierce attack up in the kit for the party-wide buff. Not the best party-wide buff for ice compositions. I could see like Laswell benefiting from it if you wanted to run like an ice Laswell comp. I feel like right now, like we are on the cusp of needing like one more ice pierce unit in order to make this composition viable. I think how you're going to be running Aranea is going to be with the Fries S VC and the Fenrir VC in like a generalized ice comp. I think her own vision card, while yes, it does give critical hit rate plus 25, is not really enough to reliably hit a reliable critical hit rate, which is unfortunate because you do have, right, like she has critical damage plus 5 in her kit, and we do have vision cards like Fries S, which you'll be setting anyway, and Fries S does have party-wide critical damage plus 13. So like you want to build Aranea crit, but she doesn't have enough critical hit rate in her kit. There's no dexterity plus ice vision card, which would be really important for building a like crit based ice team. And it's not fully there yet to make a kind of crit damage based ice team, a ice pierce composition kind of work with her vision card. If her vision card individual global buff did have something like critical hit rate plus 10 or 15 for Aranea, that might be enough to make it a little bit more viable, but we're still kind of waiting for another ice vision card that either gives dex up or something that could potentially make this composition more viable. I think we're also waiting for one more ice pierce unit, or potentially, you know, maybe like Rosa EX as a healer to an ice comp. So like maybe running Rosa EX with Fryevia with Aranea would be a viable ice comp, but I feel like ice just is not fully there yet, particularly with Setia coming out in the near future. In terms of espers as well, honestly, any ice esper is going to be great for Aranea. You can probably most likely run either Fryzess or you'll be running the mech esper that comes with her. So or with her vision card. So those are kind of the two options for ice espers. Other than that, everybody, that's kind of my initial thoughts on Aranea. I do have a lot of other thoughts in terms of Joom and Setia coming out in the near future, but I'm gonna save that for another video. We'll talk about that tomorrow on whether or not you should pull for her. But thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you do want to support me, remember you can use my affiliate link dig.gs/coins. You can show up on YouTube. You can leave a YouTube comment. I really appreciate all of that. And have a great rest of your day.